Say anything I want.
Absolutely.
We'll spill the beans.
I'm seeing this mustache, and I'm seeing the fact at some point you had to explain to your dad, Jake, saying, Dad, I'm growing a mustache just to look a little meaner than a normal guy. You must have had some reaction to that. Or did you have facial hair from an early part of your...
No, actually I grew this, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I was, showed up in spring training. This was 1981, I believe it was. And the spring of 1981, I'd grown a full beard. And when I came to camp, in the off season I grew the beard, and when I came to camp, I thought, I'm not going to shave this till I get to camp. And Yogi, who was in charge of hair, said, when I walked in the clubhouse with my gear bag and just went over to my locker and threw all my stuff, all my equipment in my locker, I turn around and there's Yogi. He says, what's that crap? And I said, what do you mean, what's that crap? He says, your crap on your face. He goes, you got to shave it off. George is going to go crazy. And I said, don't worry, Yog, I'm going to shave it off, I said, don't worry about it. I said, I'm going to shave it off. He goes, get in that bathroom and shave that damn stuff off, he goes. So I went in the bathroom and shaved it off and came out, and I had this full-blown Fu Manchu, just real bushy. And I'd kept it, and just to bust Yogi's chops, and he comes running back over to my locker and he says, "Oh no!" He says, "That thing's got to be cut right here, and you got to trim it up." He says, "Too bushy." So it's got to. George Steinbrenner doesn't allow mustaches to come down below the corner of your mouth, and to this day, no one else has ever had one. And I picked 81 just to. I thought, I looked at the, in the mirror and I thought, hey, I kind of like that Fu Manchu, but everybody thinks I grew it to be more intimidating. Actually, I grew it because, to piss Steinbrenner off. So, because we couldn't do it. And, when you tell a kid he can't do something, and some of us never grow up, I thought that looks pretty good. I like that Fu Manchu. So by the time 81, I was having a great year, and it was the split season.
Right.
And we ended up going back to the World Series and playing the Dodgers. And I guess timing is everything of when you grow something. In this case, my mustache. By the time the World Series rolled around, I had the full-blown Fu Manchu totally grown out again, and nobody said anything. So, but I was having a great year, and we had a great year as a team. And I think Steinbrenner thought, it looks pretty good as an intimidator, and as part of me. So. He never said a word to me.
You like to give George a few jabs in your career, right?
I love George. It's a love-hate thing. 1 minute you love him, the next minute you hate him, or, because he's very tough. He is a very, very tough, very demanding, and not that we're not demanding of ourselves, but he puts added, and playing with the Yankees, the tradition of the Yankees and everything, there's a tremendous amount of pressure that goes with just playing with the Yankees and being a Yankee and putting on those pinstripes with the tradition and the winning tradition and everything that goes with being a Yankee and the pride and everything else that's talked about. It's real. And I grew up out in Colorado, and that was my favorite. They were my favorite team. My dad and mom and everybody were all great Yankee fans, and because we didn't get that much exposure out in Colorado at that time, because we had a AAA team, and that was an affiliate of the Yankees. So, it was great playing for them.
You're the same age I am, and therefore I grew up in a time period where the epitome of a closer was a guy named Dick Raditz. Did that mean anything to you?
Yeah, certainly I knew the name. I'm not familiar with him because I never, like I said, we didn't get that much exposure. Mm-hmm. He was a Red Sox player. I know that. I've met Dick. I had met Dick several times and was a great guy and enjoyed meeting him. And but yes, I do know the name. I'm sorry to say that I really never saw him pitch, but I'd love to see someday if they have any clips of him. I'd love to see, because he was a hard thrower. Big guy, tough guy. So yeah, I knew him, and I knew of his reputation.
You're very, very imposing. You're quoted as saying, if I was a hitter and I knew what I know about Randy Johnson, I'd never get in the box. He's scary. Heck, if I'm a batter, I wouldn't hit against myself. We both pitch with a task, and we're going to accomplish it. Just a little sidebar: when you're in Jamestown, New York, know that Randy Johnson started here. His first year was in Jamestown, New York.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, and so tell me about Randy Johnson. Why did you say what you said?
Well, the first time that I was with the Mariners in '94, my last season, the first night we got back off the road, we opened up and christened Jacobs Field in Detroit, in Cleveland, and that was the first game played there in that stadium. And Randy pitched the opening day. It was our opening day of the '94 season, and. So we go back to Seattle, and they lockered me right next to Randy, and he was starting our home opener at the Kingdom. And when he walked in, he came walking up, and I said, "Hey, Randy, how you doing?" He just stared bullets right through me, And I went, "Oh, nice talking to you," And I got up and went into the training room. I said, "Is that the way he is every day when he starts?" And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, he's just in a trance." And they said, "Oh yeah, that's him." And so, and I know that Randy, I think some of those guys he hit in the head, I'm not so sure that it wasn't intentional.
Right.
He's a tough guy, he's a mean guy. If I was a hitter, I would not want to face Randy Johnson nor myself.
Well, you're quoted as saying you'd hit your mother if she stood in there tight enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Mom.
Kind of that early win. He always had that reputation as, he'd knock down his grandmother if he had to.
Yeah, right.
As you look at the mustache and you look at the fact of George Steinbrenner, your paths crossed, albeit very shortly, with Sparky Lyle. Sparky Lyle in New York and literally was Cy Young Award winner in '77. Enter Rich Gossage into the Yankee system, and next thing you know, Cy Young to sayonara.
Yeah. Greg Nettles said that, didn't he?
Yeah. Greg coined that phrase, and I when I had the opportunity thought I was going to sign with the Yankees, I had envisioned coming over and being the best left-handed, right-handed combination ever, but with me and Sparky, and I didn't come over here to take Sparky's job, and it ended up they gave me his job on a silver platter, and it was a very difficult time for me. I struggled with that. That's not what I wanted. Like I said, they gave me his job on a silver platter, and and Sparky always used to say, well, and I talked to him about this, it wasn't anything that was hidden. We talked about this, and I told him what my intentions were, and he said, well, Goose, are they going to take a guy that throws 100 mile an hour or a slider? And Sparky, how could you argue with Sparky? I mean, he had tremendous success, was a great relief pitcher, had won the Cy Young the year before, and now enter me, and they put Sparky on the shelf, and that's not what I intended it to be, and but it didn't work out the way I envisioned it, and when Sparky went from Cy Young to sayonara, and Nettles coined that phrase again, and it was unfortunate, really, and because to this day and throughout that whole season, we were very, very close, Sparky and me. Yeah.
You started off when you signed with the White Sox as a starting pitcher. Who ultimately determined that a guy like Rich Gossage is better used in a bullpen?
Well, actually, when I came to the White Sox, I was a starting pitcher in the minor leagues. But when I made the club in 1972 as a non-roster player with the White Sox, I was invited to camp, as I said, as a non-roster player, and ended up making the club. And that was immediately Tanner, when I made the club, he says, you're in the bullpen. Well, I didn't care, but the bullpen at that time was not a place where you really wanted to be. The bullpen was a kind of a junk pile where old starters went that couldn't start anymore. So, I had envisioned I wanted to be a starter, but hey, I'd have cleaned the toilets or whatever, just because I was in the big leagues, and didn't matter as long as I pitched, and give me the ball and I'll pitch anywhere you want me to. But that is really not where I wanted to be. And like I said, it wasn't the glamorous place at that time to be. Raleigh Fingers was just starting to have some success out in Oakland, and as that kind of short man, or at that time it wasn't called even a closer. The word closer hadn't even been coined yet,
right.
And so you were a short man or a long man or middle relief, somewhere in there. That was the terminology. And the best, in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me was Tanner putting me in the bullpen, and the rest is history.
Tanner sought you when he went to Pittsburgh as well. How did that work out? You're big. Our area is a big Pirate fan, and
Sure.
fans, and so we were loved to have you there that one season, and hated to have you go when you left.
I hated to leave too. I enjoyed Pittsburgh very much. I was going to be a free agent after that 77 season. Tanner traded for me for Richie Zisk and Silvio Martinez for me and Terry Forrester. And so I really, I got a call. They were in the winter meetings in the off season, and I got a call. The phone rang, and I picked it up, and he said, "This is Chuck." And I said, "Chuck who?" And he goes, "Chuck Tanner, damn it." He goes, "And you're back in the bullpen. We traded for you." He goes, "We traded for you, and you're back in the bullpen." He says, "I'll be in touch with you in a couple more days." And that was the end of the conversation. That's as long as the conversation took. And he goes, "Great to have you back, and you're back in the bullpen." And I was very happy to go back in the bullpen. I didn't mind starting, but that 76 season they moved me. I had won the Fireman of the Year in 76 or 75, and then we didn't have any arms to really for starting pitchers, and they traded for Clay Carroll, which Clay was at the end of his career, and it allowed me freed me up for, we got another short man where Clay had some pretty good success over those Cincinnati teams, and so that freed me up to start. And I would have done I told him, I said, "I'll do anything you want me to do," and so I did start that year. I was 9-17, but I had a great, really a pretty good year. I didn't have a 9-17 year. I finished 14 or 15 complete ball games that year, and pitched around 225 innings, something like that. So I had a pretty darn good year. I don't think I got one ball game saved for me. I left with probably 6 or 7 leads, and to end up with a non-decision is basically what it ended up. And so getting traded back to Pittsburgh and being back in the bullpen, that's really where I wanted to be.
Did you get a sense that a couple years later that same team of which you were part would be world champions?
Oh yeah, definitely. And Chuck, I've heard Chuck say this. He says, if we'd have had you for those other couple years, he says we might have won 3 world championships, because we came very close in 77, and then 78 they also finished second, I believe, and then 79 they ended up winning it. But and a lot of the players said that if we'd had me and with Colby, the great closer, he was a great relief pitcher in his in his own right, and had a great career. And with both of us in that bullpen, it would have been lights out, because and I think they would have won a couple of more world championships. But the money, it was a no-brainer. I think they offered me $110, $20, and $130,000 for a 3-year contract, and that ended up not being even in the ballpark. So I was disappointed to leave. I cried that night. I left when I pulled away stopped by we'd moved out of our apartment, and this was after the season was over, and stopped by the stadium to get some of my equipment out, and because I knew I figured I wasn't coming back, and heck, I cried, pulling out of the stadium there at Three Rivers, and I was very disappointed to leave that. That was a great bunch of guys. Stargell and Pops was awesome, an awesome guy, and Parker was just one of the most awesome players I'd ever seen, and a great guy, and just a great chemistry on that ball club. And then Tanner was instrumental in my success as a pitcher, and it was just the whole thing that it was really sad to leave.
As you worked your way up through the White Sox, the Pirates, and ultimately the Yankees, were you picking up things from certain pitchers like Tick Colvey and others that sort of helped you out, or did you have a sense that your mission was you're going to throw that thing so hard, so fast that you really had that in place already?
Well, I think I was always aggressive on the mound. I was always, a bulldog out there. I always said, I'd drill my mother if she got up there and, crowded the plate too much, and really that's the way it was, so my attitude toward pitching really was the way it was. Everybody goes, was like Al Roboski had kind of a shtick of slamming the ball in the glove and kind of a show. Mine wasn't anything like a show. It was just the way I was when I went between the lines. And I think fear had a lot to do with that. I think that the fear of failure spurs you on to, you're afraid you're going to mess up, and you either, it's like Africa, it's like being an animal in Africa. You either eat or get eaten,
right.
And it's no different on a baseball field. You either do the job or you don't do the job, and if you don't do the job, you're going to be gone pretty quick. So, I think it was a fear thing that I was scared to death out there, but I never let that show through. But baseball, the unknowns of baseball, I think that's what's so great about the game is. Taking that mound and well, let's see what happens today, and just give it your best shot. And then, that's kind of the way my attitude was about going about my business.
Is it also the fact that as a reliever, you kind of know more or less, at least in the time you pitched, you could be going any day. So when you come to the ballpark, you've got to be prepared. Unlike a starter who knows that there's a rotation to this.
Yeah, and I loved that. I loved, the best thing that ever happened to me, as I said before, was Tanner putting me in the bullpen. I had no thoughts of being a relief pitcher, but at that time, it had just started to evolve into the specialized game. As I said, Fingers was having some success out there, and I loved when I got used to being in the bullpen. I loved the opportunity and the thought. I hated the 4 days off in between starts. It just was boring. It was, it just wasn't me. After I'd gotten used to being in the bullpen, and that opportunity and the adrenaline was always there. Even coming to the ballpark and driving in your car, there was adrenaline even at that point of the day. That, hey, tonight, man, I might have an opportunity to pitch. So that's what was so exciting and attractive to me as being a closer is that opportunity to pitch every night. You were more of a regular player.
Bill Madden of the Daily News wrote yesterday, he had a conversation with Tony La Russa, and he posed the question, what's more valuable to a team, a closer or a number one pitcher? La Russa said, closer. Then the same question was posed to Brian Cashman, and he said a number one pitcher. Just like to get your reaction to that question.
Oh, absolutely not. I think a closer is way more invaluable to a ball club than a number one. Certainly a number one is very important, but you take Mariano Rivera off the Yankees and see what kind of success they've had. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you put a guy like Mariano Rivera on the Red Sox team over those years, hey, they're going to have a couple more world championships. I guarantee it. Mm-hmm. So, there's not any. To me, there's no comparison. This guy can pitch every day for you. The psychological factor of that is so huge. To have a guy like Mariano, and this is the difference between what in my day and when I was a closer, I might have to pitch 3 innings. Well, I was lost to the team for 2 or 3 days. To have a guy like Mariano Rivera and to have those setup guys take that workload off of that setup guy is huge. And to have a guy psychologically a huge advantage to your ball club to know that man is sitting out there in the bullpen for you, and the opposition knows that guy's sitting out there too. It's a huge psychological advantage to your ball club, a huge psychological disadvantage to the opposition to have a guy like Mariano Rivera. So let me tell you, I think Brian's a little off on this one, but you can't take away from what that number one starter is. But man, to have a guy like Mariano Rivera in your bullpen every night, man, take him out of there and see what Brian says about that. Yeah.
Well, it's a good segue to you talked about the Red Sox, you talked about the Yankees, talked about closer, you just talked about pitching 3 innings. You've often been quoted saying the greatest game you were part of was the 1978 playoff game with the Red Sox.
Right.
and ultimately it worked its way down to the Yastrzemski. Walk us through that game itself, because you really worked yourself up to that. You knew you were going to be part of that game, coming to the stadium that night.
Yeah, not even that day. It was a day game, Monday day game. The regular season had ended on the Sunday.
Sure.
The Red Sox won. We lost to Cleveland, and forced that one-game playoff. And we flew into Boston. And man, if there's one place you don't want to play one game is in Fenway Park, because no lead there is a safe lead with that green monster. And so anything can happen in that ballpark. You could get a couple of fly balls that are just off the. Bucky Dent fly ball didn't go into the net by much, but just enough. And so you get a lot of doubles and things, and those guys knew how to use that wall. They had a great lineup. I went to bed thinking the night before that I'm gonna be facing Yaz for the final out tomorrow. I just had envisioned it. I don't know why, because he's probably the guy you'd least want to face in that situation because of who he is, right, and the great career and great clutch hitter that he was, and he used that monster as well as anybody, as being a left-handed hitter. So I went to bed thinking that, hey, I'm going to be facing Yaz for the final out. I came into that ball game with leading 5-2, and I came into that game, my legs were shaking. I could barely walk to the mound. I'd never been in a game of this magnitude ever. Before that or since then. I'd never been in another ball game of that magnitude where the whole season rests on one game. And it was I was standing in the outfield that day thinking, in that morning, it was a beautiful one of those Indian summer fall days. It was just a beautiful day, and no wind, kind of cool, kind of just perfect temperature. And I was thinking, it's a shame today there has to be a loser, because I had tremendous respect for that Red Sox team. That was a great Red Sox ball club, and we had a great ball club. And I said it's kind of sad that today somebody's going to have to be a loser, and I came into that ball game, my legs were shaking. It was there was one out in the 7th inning. I relieved Ron Guidry, and I just I got out of that jam in the 7th, but I'll tell you, I've never been that nervous before or since then. And my legs, I thought I was going to collapse. I didn't know how I was going to put one foot in front of the other, because I couldn't walk. My legs were just jello. And so I just got on the mound, and got out of that jam. And then in the 8th inning, I gave up 2 runs to make it 5-4. And to this day, I have not watched that ball game ever,
Really?
Never before. I've seen clips of it, but I've never seen the whole ball game. And I can't even really tell you how I gave up those 2 runs. I know there were some base hits and things, and I know how I got out of the jam in the 9th. And the 9th inning rolls around, and I said, well, I gave up a couple. Guys got on. Piniella makes the great play in right field, or the ball game's over. Or it's a different ball game. At least it's tied. But that sun ball gets in the ball got in the sun, and Piniella makes the great backhanding stab of the ball in right field. I think Remy hit it, I believe, and then now I've got runners. I think it's second and third. I could be wrong, but I think it was second and third. There's 2 outs, and who's coming up to the plate? And I started talking to myself, I started asking questions and answering questions. I said, well, and within the standing ovation, and Yaz was stepping up, and he gets his standing ovation for a minute or so. And I'm sitting out there, I've got time to talk to myself and answer myself. And I said, well, here's what you went to bed last night thinking. I said, this is what you went to bed thinking, that Yaz, you're going to be facing Yaz for the final out. And sure enough, here it is. And I said, why are you so nervous? This is supposed to be fun. It's always been fun. I've always played the game for the love and the fun. I said, why are you so nervous? I said, this is what you live for. And I said, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I said, well, I can be home tomorrow elk hunting in Colorado in the mountains. And all those things that I just said in that moment, in those few moments there, it just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. And it was the first day that I took a deep breath and just sat there, and Yaz got into the box, and took that deep breath for the first time all day, and my legs stopped quivering and shaking, and I let the first pitch go, and I knew it had, more velocity on it than anything I'd thrown all day. I knew that, and it was down in the strike zone for a ball. Then the next pitch was pretty much right down the middle, and then it kind of tailed in on Yaz, and then he pops it up to Nettles. But and then we went on to repeat as world champions. But that was by far the biggest game I'd ever played in, and Red Sox Yankees in Fenway. It just doesn't get any better than that. So to have been a part of that, I remember walking into the clubhouse after the game, and God, it was just sheer pandemonium. And I'm standing I'm sitting in the training room, and it was off limits to you couldn't even move in the clubhouse. They're tiny clubhouses anyway, and then the media blitz that was there that afternoon was just off the charts, and everybody was in the clubhouse, and so I went into the training room just to get some ice on my shoulder and just kind of gather my thoughts and think about that game or think about what had just happened, and Munson came in, and the trainer was putting ice on my shoulder, and he goes, "Where'd you get that?" He sat next to me on the training table, and he goes, "Where'd you get that?" And I went, "What do you mean, where'd I get that?" He goes, "Oh," he said, "that pitch had another foot on anything you'd thrown all day." And I said, "Well, I finally relaxed." He goes, "What took you so damn long?" So that was a wonderful day. It was a great day. I'm glad we came out. I'm glad we won it. That's all.
Talk about Thurman and what he meant to the team, and also you, a guy that obviously tragically lost his life in the prime of his life, but he was such, the captain and the guy that was the leader of that team. Just talk about what he meant to you personally, and also to the Yankees as a whole.
Oh, he was our captain. I mean, and to, people go, "Oh, well, he was a captain." Well, he was our leader of our team, and everybody loved him so much. He was the backbone really of our ball club, and he set the tone. I mean, we always had a lot of fun. We always laughed in the fear of failure, and the fear of the unknown. I mean, we always used to laugh at the pressure situations, and he was great that way. He was Thurman and I remember one time in Chicago, the first time I really ever had any connection with Munson. I was starting. This was in 1976, and we were facing the Yankees in Comiskey, and it was the second or third inning, and I drilled him right in the elbow with, I always pitch guys on the inner half of the plate, keep them from extending their arms, and Munson was no different than any of those big guys. You had to pitch him in and pitch him tight, and this ball got away from me and hit him in the elbow, and I mean, it was one of the best shots I've ever hit a guy with, and it hit him right on the corner, right on the tip of the elbow, and the ball fell straight down. It was not a glancing blow, and he had to leave the ball game. And let me tell you, when Munson left the ball game, he was near death. I mean, this guy was hurt, and so they took him to the hospital for X-rays, and the elbow, I guess, really swelled up like a softball, and took him to the hospital. And this was, like I said, the second inning. Well, after the game, I finished the ball game. I pitched a complete game. I'm standing in front of my locker, and the bat boy from the visiting clubhouse comes over, and he said, "Here, Goose, Thurman wanted me to give you this." And he had torn off a piece of paper off the bottom of a notepad, and it said, "I took your best fucking shot, you fucking cocksucker. Signed the White Gorilla." So cut.
Yeah, we will.
Edit. I took your best motherfucking shot, you fucking cocksucker. Signed the White Gorilla. That was it. So
That's terrific.
So, and then, and I knew what a great competitor he was. He had a reputation at that time, of being Thurman Munson, and don't mess with Thurman. And then I got to play with him with the Yankees, and we had a big laugh about that, but it was, he's the greatest catcher I ever had the privilege of throwing to, and we had a lot of fun on the mound, on the field. We had a lot of fun off the field. And we became very, very close friends. And then of course, we lost him in that plane crash. So that was very tragic.
Talk about on and off the field. During 1978, when you're there in the game you just talked about, that was a wild year, not only coming from 14 games behind, but Billy Martin gets to heave-ho and enter Bob Lemon. What was the clubhouse like when all of that chaos was going on?
Well, it was crazy. I had come down that day, and God, there was 100 media guys, press guys in the lobby, in the hotel lobby in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And I'd come down to grab some lunch, and so I knew something was going on. I said, "What's going on?" So the first person I saw, I don't remember who it was, but I said, "What's going on?" They said they fired Billy. And so that afternoon, or late that afternoon in the clubhouse, we had a meeting when we got to the ballpark, and Bob Lemon held a meeting, and he said, "Boys," he says, "you were world champions last year. It's basically the same team as it was last year." He said, this is his meeting. He said, hopefully I make the right pitch. He said, "I'll try to handle the pitching. I'll try to make the right decisions. Hopefully I'll make the right decisions." He said, let's go to work. And that was as long as Bob's meeting took. Yeah. Really, that is exactly what he said. And he said, let's go to work. And that was it. And then we started our comeback. And it would have never been the greatest comeback in history if I hadn't dug us that deep hole. Starting out in '78, I'd put so much pressure on myself with Sparky taking his job, and I think I lost the first 3 ball games when we opened up on the road. We opened our season in '78 on the road, and I think I had given up 3 walk-off home runs. Well, you might give up 1 or 2 in your whole career walk-off home runs, and I'd given up already 3 in 1 week, in the first week of the season. So, I started out very rough. I would get to the mound in Yankee Stadium. Well, first of all, this little pinstripe Toyota would bring us out of the bullpen, and I would, they hated my guts, and so when this pinstripe Toyota would come around on the warning track, they would throw everything that they were eating at this car. They hated me. We had to turn the windshield wipers on, to see where the hell we were going. It was hot dogs, and things were hitting the car. Beers, Cokes, hot dogs, just anything they had in their hands, they would fire it at the car because I was in it. And they hated me. And I would get to the mound, and Munson look at me one day, and he goes, "Well, how you gonna lose this one?" I couldn't believe my catcher was saying this. I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll just get your little ass back there, and we'll find out, okay?" So, that's kind of how it started out, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And the harder I tried, and that's really the bottom line, the harder you try, the worse you get, because, your fastball straightens out, you're trying to throw the ball instead of 100 miles an hour, you're trying to throw it 200 miles an hour, and it doesn't work that way, and you have to there's a fine line between relaxed and aggressive, and I tell kids that, and they look at you like, "Oh, okay, I'll relax," but you got to be aggressive. So it's kind of a contradicting thing. But I tried. The harder I tried, the worse I got. And it dug us that deep hole. We wouldn't have been on our rings as repeat world champions. We ended up repeating, and on our rings it said, and inscribed, Mr. Steinbrenner put, greatest comeback in history, and I don't think anybody's ever come back from that deficit even since then. Mm-hmm. And I always said, it would have never been the greatest comeback if I hadn't dug us that deep hole, but I also helped dig us out of that hole too. Was there a point, Goose, where you kind of got over that hump? Do you recall specifically maybe an appearance where everything turned out okay, and realized, hey, relax, I'm gonna... It just got worse. I reached rock bottom in Toronto one afternoon. It was an afternoon game, and the score was tied, and it was the 9th inning, bottom of the 9th inning in Toronto, and there was a guy on second base, and there was 1 out, I believe, and there was a bunt. There was nobody out, and they were gonna sacrifice him to third, and they sacrificed, and I picked the bunt up, and I was so nervous about, kind of in the back of my head, how am I going to lose this one? It's like, here we go again. And then I picked this ball up. I picked this little bunt up, and the wind was blowing 95 miles an hour, man. I mean, in that old stadium in Toronto, it was right off the lake, and it was cold, and the wind, like I said, was blowing 90 miles an hour. And I picked this ball up and threw it, and I got under it a little bit, and then it got into the wind, and it took it like 20 rows up. End of ball game. End of ball game. He was sacrificed to third, threw it in the seats, winning run scores. That was it. I remember just walking in and just collapsing in my locker backwards and broke everything, chairs, everything that was in my locker. I broke. I just landed. I just kind of just fell backwards, and that was the lowest. That was the lowest time in my career ever. I mean, the game had never brought me to my knees, and I was on my knees and really on my ass into my locker. But I was sitting there and I just started crying. I was just bawling like a little kid. I didn't know which end to, I didn't know where to go from here. I felt it was the first time in my career ever that I felt like quitting. I said, I just can't take this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And, I had lost the ball game, like Munson said, every way you could possibly think. And this was the final straw. And I sat in my locker clear through this, everybody's showered and buses leaving. And Catfish Hunter came over and I see this hand coming through my clothes, and all my clothes are sitting on top of me. And Catfish comes over and he goes, and I see this hand reach through and I see it's Cat. And he goes, come on. He goes, you're going to dinner with us. Get your ass in that shower. He said, we're taking you to dinner tonight. Mm-hmm. And it was Thurman, Munson, Reggie, Nettles, Munson. There was another couple guys there too that went to dinner, but they said, hey, you're gonna be all right, man. We're behind you 100%. So my teammates really, that was the key. Those guys were so awesome, and they'd been through it. I mean, everybody goes through the game, bringing them to their knees at least once in their career, and you go through hard times, but this was ridiculous. I mean, it was really off the charts and over the top, man. Like I said, it was the first time I'd ever, and then gradually I started pitching a little bit better, and what happened was I reached rock bottom. I said, I don't give a damn what happens from here on out. I can't go any lower, and then I started pitching better. And but it was the help of my teammates that got me out of that deep hole.
With 9 All-Star game selections, and and you're an inch away from the Hall of Fame, and we'll know next year at this time. We can congratulate you. You're really known often when they think Goose Gossage and they do name recognition, they think of Pine Tar and George Brett. Walk us through that crazy game.
Oh, it was nuts. Well, it happened in Kansas City. Everybody thinks it was Billy Martin that spotted the pine tar. Well, it wasn't Billy. It was Greg Nettles. Munson had been called out on it 2 or 3 years before that, and so he knew about the rule. And when Brett came up in Kansas City with the game on the line, there was a runner at second base, and I remember Greg calling timeout and coming over, and he said, "Hey," he said, "if he gets a hit here, we're going to get his bat because he's using an illegal bat." I went, okay, great. So I got him out, no harm, no foul. We didn't say anything. So we leave Kansas City. They come into our place at the stadium, and here's Brett again, and I should have been in the game probably 2 or 3 hitters before that. Well, Billy was notorious for not being able to handle pitching and didn't know pitching from, he knew it was hard to hit. That was about it. And, I'm standing on the mound, and UL Washington beats out a chopper over my head. And he beats out a chopper over my head. Now I got to face Brett. And Brett's the last guy in that situation anybody wants to face, So I thought, there's no way that Brett is going to beat me. Well, when he came up, Nettles comes over again. He goes, "Hey, remember," he says, "if he gets a hit here, we're getting his bat, man. He's using an illegal bat." I said, okay. So the first pitch, I'm thinking, I'm going to walk him. I'm not going to let him beat me. And So the first pitch was a high and away fastball, and high and away, way out of the strike zone. And he reaches out and he hits this ball down the left field line. It's got home run distance, and I'm thinking it's gone. Well, it just slices foul, just misses the foul pole. God, I said, I can't believe it. Well, this next pitch, I'm thinking I'm coming in this time, and I don't care if this ball hits him in the neck. I'm coming in. So I throw it in, and he Tommy Hawks this ball. He was a great hitter, and hit this ball. It's right here. I said I wanted that ball to hit your neck. He said if I hadn't hit that ball, it would have been in my neck. And he just hit it way out front like this, and then hits it into the seats for the home run, and then the rest is history. And it's the maddest human being I've ever seen in my lifetime. And if he'd had a gun, I think we'd all been dead. But it was. People ask me who the greatest hitter ever was. I think George Brett in his prime, in my prime, and during my era, he was the best hitter. I faced a lot of the great hitters on their way out toward the backsides of their careers: Al Kaline, Tony Oliva, Hank Aaron, Killebrew, these kinds of hitters. I faced those guys, but Brett in his prime was the best hitter I ever faced. And then this Pine Tar thing was, he hit another shot, heard around our world off me. It was the 80 playoff game into the upper deck at Yankee Stadium. And that ball, when he hit that pitch, it was the loudest sound I've ever heard a bat and ball making contact. It just kind of shocked me, and I was like, really, it was like a M80 going off. It was like unbelievable, and I flinched at it. That's how loud it was, and he was just a great hitter. He did whatever he needed to do. He was a great spray hitter, great alleys guy, left center, right center. And then if you needed the long ball, he could hit the long ball with the best of them.
Can I do just a follow on the Pine Tar? When all of this is happening, and Billy Martin's out there, and you see the movies, and they're showing the actual gradation of it, what are you doing on the mound?
Sure, we're laughing. We're having a good time with this. It's like I can't. We're laughing. Well, Greg has been calling this ever since we've been facing him in those tough situations, and we've been waiting for something like this to happen, and now it's happening. And then when McClellan, calls him out, we were just elated. We were tickled. Well, the ending of that thing was that the league overruled the umpires. The umpires were just doing their job. They read the rule book correctly, and Munson had been called out on it. And Lee McPhail, we weren't going to get any favors passed our way by McPhail and the league, because Steinbrenner and Billy were all over the league all the time about different issues, and so we weren't going to catch a break. And but we didn't think they could overrule it either. It was in the rule book. Well. McPhail overruled the rule book and said that the Pine Tar had nothing to do with propelling the ball into the seats, and therefore, the home run is going to stand. And, I ended up getting a loss, but we had a lot of fun with that thing also. It was a crazy day, to say the least.
Go ahead. Just missed the Hall of Fame this year. You're just within like 3 percentage points of getting the number of votes. Just talk about the obvious and how much that means to you, and actually the disappointment in not getting in sooner.
Well, it's disappointing. It's been disappointing. My mother was alive up until September 21st of 06, and the only urgency that I ever had was her. She always said, she goes, I hope I'm around long enough to see you go in the Hall of Fame, and she didn't make it, but. That was the only urgency that I ever had, that I wanted her to be around to see me go into the Hall of Fame. My father was a huge fan of mine, or I was, he was my biggest fan, and my mom was too. And he never got to see me play in the big leagues. He always said I was going to play in the big leagues, but he never got to see me play in the big leagues. And playing with the Yankees, he was a great Yankee fan, just never got to see me. So this was very important to me, that if I was worthy of the Hall, I wish that I was hoping that they would elect me, and it didn't happen. So really the urgency there is not anymore. And just to be considered for the Hall of Fame is unbelievable. I do take exception to being compared to today's relief pitchers, because the role of the reliever has changed so much. And I do take offense to saying, I hear Mariano Rivera is the greatest reliever of all time. Well, do what we did, and then we'll compare apples to apples. It's really apples and oranges of what they're comparing today. Now it takes three guys to do what it took me to do, because I did three guys' jobs. I set up and closed. And so to compare what we did, and I'm not taking anything away from Mariano Rivera, it just had not evolved into what it has evolved into up to today. With basically a one-inning guy. Mariano comes in once in a while and pitches an out or two in the eighth, but very seldom does that happen. And I just wish that they would compare what we used to do. We used to log a lot of tough innings, and any time that you go in that dugout and sit down, and I bet you Mariano's success rate is not what it is pitching one inning as opposed to pitching in that eighth inning. So, I do take offense to that, and I don't think there's any number. I don't think there's any statistic in the book today, in the game today, that you can compare. 500 home runs don't mean what 500 home runs used to mean, because of all the offense that they wanted to put in the game by design. It's not the same game, and it's still a great game. Don't get me wrong, but don't compare Hank Aaron to Barry Bonds. When Barry Bonds stands up there and the last thing he's thinking about is getting hit with a pitch, where Hank Aaron, that was the first thing he had to worry about, was the first two pitches thrown at his head, first because he was black and because he was a hitter. The second thing was because he was a hitter. So, I don't buy that Barry Bonds is the greatest hitter of all time. I just don't buy it, because anytime that I was taught as a pitcher, hey, son, if you want to make a living up here, you got to make that hitter as uncomfortable as you possibly can if you're going to make a living. And that was just the way it was back then, that you had to pitch inside and get those guys out of that rocking chair. Today, hitters, a ball gets away today at a guy, and they're staring at the pitcher like, they're intimidating the pitcher. Well, the game's backwards from what it used to be. And it's not even the same. I don't even think it's a skeleton of a game, the same game that I broke in playing. And I think the players are, to a degree, soft. Hitters. They don't like to be crowded. They don't like to feel uncomfortable. And I make a great case. Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. When was the last time you ever saw one of them undressed at home plate? Never. They never came close to these guys. Everything's out over the plate. Boom. Home run, home run, home run. They just kept pounding balls into the cheap seats, and nothing was ever done about it. And that would have never happened back in the day, never. And let me tell you, it puts a little different spin on that at bat when you know that a ball's coming at your could be coming at your body, at your head, or your wherever. So I don't. The offense that they've created in this game today, and they wanted to do it by design. And that's fine, but just call it what it is. It's not the same game. No number means the same number, in my opinion, than the numbers that were put up by all the great players that put those numbers up.
If Bonds does break Hank's home run record, should there be an asterisk given the allegations?
Well, I think that's what they are, allegations. I think you're going to have to wait and see what the verdict and what the investigation brings in. This ongoing investigation, I don't know what's ever going to come out of this, but I can tell you this, that there's going to be a dark cloud over this thing if, regardless. McGwire, whatever advice, I'm sitting in a lawyer's office here, I certainly wouldn't have given him that advice the way he came off in front of Congress in that investigation. He should have done like Sosa did. I can't speak English anymore, all of a sudden. He can no comprende, man. And, so McGwire, he says, I'm not here to talk about the past, but what the hell are we here for, And Mark's a good friend of mine, and I played 2 years with Mark in Oakland, and he's a gentleman, he's a great guy, And I think he'd have been much better off even just coming out and saying nothing, or pleading the fifth, or just coming out and saying, yeah, I used him, and I'm here to say that, I'm not proud of that, or whatever he wanted to say, that our youth, our kids, I think, are the real danger of this thing, and that's why Congress got involved, and something needed to be done. And, I think baseball was hoping that it would just, Bud Selig was hoping that it'd just go away. And because there was a long time there was probably 4, 5, 6 months there that went by with, there was no news on the front of steroids or anything else. And then this book that these two writers wrote came out, and then it hit the fan again, and brought light to what it is, and at the center of this lies the whole integrity of the game, and all the great players that played before, and this home run mark is the most sacred of all statistics, and there needed to be, and I'm wondering, why is there not an investigation going on and find out and get to the bottom of this steroid thing, and I think, and hopefully they will. I don't know what's going to come out of this. No one does out of the investigation, but and at the center of this lies the whole integrity of the game and what it stands for.
You were talking about intimidation a little bit earlier, and it brings back to mind another one of those highlight tapes of Goose Gossage when you're with the Padres, and you're out facing Kirk Gibson, and Dick Williams comes out and talks to you, and Sparky Anderson's talking to Kirk Gibson because they'd mic'd up the managers.
Right.
Tell me about that. It's such a great byplay.
Well, we got to back up a few innings, about the second inning of the ball game in Detroit. It was game 5, and so I just pop out in the dugout. I've been up in the clubhouse, kind of getting ready and ready to go down and get in the bullpen, and I come out and Gibson's up, and I just pop out into the dugout. Tim Lawler, a left-handed pitcher, is standing there. He's probably my best friend on the team, and he said, hey, how'd Gibby do against you? I said, I own him. It just jumped out of my mouth, and I never said anything like, never even, if I had success against a guy, just, don't wake up a dead horse, or whatever, don't wake him up, and just leave it alone. And it just flew out of my mouth. I own him. Well, if I faced Gibson, and I did own him, and he'll even say it, if I faced him, and the statistics read something like this, if I faced him 50 times, I struck him out 49 times. Really, it's that crazy. It's that it's exactly that. And I think he made contact one time with the ball, and that was it. And so now, fast forward into the, 9th inning or 8th inning or whatever, 8th inning, I guess it was, bottom of the 8th, and Gibby, here comes Gibby, and Dick Williams is going 4. Put him on, like this from the dugout, and Terry Kennedy gives me 4 like that. And I'm going, no. I said, no, I don't want to walk him, I don't want to walk him. And Terry's looking over at Dick, and Dick's going like this, and I'm going, no. So all of a sudden, somebody called timeout. Kennedy or somebody, Dick, I think, called timeout, and he comes running out, and he goes, what the hell's going on out here? And he said, well, he doesn't want to walk him. I said, no, I want to go after him. I said, let's go after him. He goes, okay, all right. He says, go after him. Next pitch, in the upper deck. Shit. Should have walked him. But if I had it to do over again, the success really that I did, I'm not making an excuse, but I hadn't pitched in 8 or 10 days. I think it was 10 days from the time that I pitched in a ball game to that game there. So it'd been a long time since I'd been in a ball game. So, I wasn't real sharp that night, but regardless of that, with the success that I had against him, to this day, I tip my cap to him. He hit it into the upper deck, and the rest is history. But maybe I'm stupid, but I don't think I think I'd have done the same thing over again.
What did Williams say?
Nothing. Not a damn thing. nothing. There's nothing he could say. I took I took it all. And so we're sitting in the clubhouse, and I'm sitting in front of my locker, and Lawler's about 4 or 5 lockers down from me, right? And I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting there in front of my locker. I'm stunned. I can't believe what has just happened. The game's over. They're world champions. We're like, I'm sitting there. I'm just shaking my head, and for some reason I just looked over, and I was kind of looking at guys, and I looked over, and there's Lawler, and he's got his glove over his face, and he's laughing his ass off because he he knows what I said in the second inning when I came out. I own him. Yeah, right. I said that's your home run. But I'm it's real quiet in there. You can hear a pin drop, and I'm like. And I, to this day, I tell him, that's your goddamn home run. That I didn't give that home run. That's your home run. That's all yours, man. I said.
So at some point, Goose, you're 22 years. At some point, you wake up and say, "This is it. I'm done." What?
No, the strike got me.
Yep.
I wanted to continue to play. I really did. Chuck Tanner told me a long time ago when I first came to the big leagues, he says, son, and he poked me in the chest, and Tanner would get right in your face, and he had bad cigar breath. And he'd get right in your face, and he told me, he says, son, he says, this is so special. He says, you make them tear that uniform off. And I did. And I got caught in a strike in '94. I was having a pretty good year with Seattle. Mm-hmm. And I was having a real good year with Seattle, and then the strike happened, and we didn't have a World Series for the first time. It really got ugly. And then when they came back to work the following spring, guys on the fence that were invited to camp to make a club, really there wasn't the opportunity to make the club because it was a shortened spring. I think it was only a couple weeks long, the spring training. Just go down. It was kind of a cram course of get ready. Get your arms ready, and then the season's going to start because it was late in that spring that they came to an agreement. And so guys like me that could, a regular spring training where you have the time to fit guys in to see what they can do and give them innings, we just didn't have that luxury, and I got caught in that and ended up, not that being my last year, '94. So. But I have no regrets. All I wanted to do is put a big league uniform on one time, and it turned into 25 years, and I still can't comprehend it. I thought, after '94, after I got out of the game, I thought, this is going to register. It'll settle in. I'll be able to reflect back and on things that I did and my career. Because during the season, during your playing days, you really don't have time to really stop and smell the roses. Because you're only as good as what you were last night, or as bad, and that's all they remember, and so you really never really get to fully comprehend the career. And I thought, after I get out after I'm retired, I'll be able to reflect back, and the longer I'm retired now, the harder it is for me to even reflect back on it. I can't believe I did what I did, and had the career that I had. It was, I always said, it's like a 10-year-old kid going to Disney World for the first time and getting on their favorite ride and not getting off for 22 years. And, that's kind of the way it was. And I still can't comprehend what I did.
Goose, real quick, when you get to the podium at Cooperstown, can you give me a snapshot, just a couple of, if what you would like to say when that day comes?
I have no idea. I really don't. I don't know what I'd say. I really don't. I haven't even thought about it. I'm not there yet, and people want me to sign stuff HOF. I won't do that. Until I'm in, and until it's till I get that call. I don't know what I'm going to say. I've never looked behind. I said the reason why I was a great relief pitcher is I had a bad memory. I had a short memory. And the best thing you reliever can have is a short memory, because you think about what happened last night bad, and I guarantee it's going to happen bad again tonight. So I forgot. I learned to forget yesterday, I've never lived in tomorrow. You know, tomorrow's out of sight as far as I'm concerned. You know, I've always concentrated on what I'm doing right now, and so I really haven't thought about that speech at all. You know, I just can't even. It's impossible to comprehend it. Really, just to even think and be considered for the Hall of Fame. You know, when you start out a career, as I said, you know, all I wanted to do is put a big league uniform on one time, and to think that back then, if somebody had said, "Hey, you might go into the Hall someday," you know, I said, "Oh, you're full of crap," you know. But it's an unbelievable career. Yeah, I just had so much fun.
Congratulations.
Yes,
Thank
thank you for your time.
This has been terrific. Goose
You're welcome.
Gossage. Oh, this is
You're welcome.
great. And I know we're going to get some autographs. You don't
Yeah.
have to sign HOF if you want to.
How's Bobby doing?
Do we have a regular ballpoint? Did we?
Yeah.
Just want one of these? Is it?
No, there's one right there. I see it.
How's Bobby doing?
That's perfect.
Goose, do you know?
I talked to him on the phone. I haven't gotten an update in probably 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe it's been a month now.
Okay.
Yeah. When you say Bobby, who you keep?
Bobby Mercer.
Oh,
he
you
has
got to
a-
bring to him.
Yeah.
That's right, I remember that now.
Is that working?
Yes, perfect.
The art of the autograph. When you got a team autograph, does everybody let the meat of the ball be available for the manager? Is that
Yes. Yeah, the sweet spot. Yeah, don't sign in the manager's spot. Unless you want to go to the minor leagues.
Goose, what are you doing? You know, what's your